Welcome to HFY Galaxy Tales. Like this video and subscribe the channel for more HFY stories. Listen, I have been teaching at the Vorathian Strategic Institute for approximately 342 cycles, and in that time, I have seen candidates from 600 different species attempt our entrance examinations. 600. Beings with methane-based biology, creatures that communicate through color-shifting membranes, even a sentient gas cloud that somehow managed to fill out the application forms. But never, and I mean absolutely never, had I encountered anything quite as baffling as the human. Her name was Kira Valdez. Short by most galactic standards, standing at roughly 1.6 meters with a mop of dark brown hair that she kept pulling back into something she called a ponytail, only for it to escape and fall across her face again. Her skin was this odd tan color that humans get from something called sun exposure, apparently, and her eyes were this deep brown that seemed to constantly be evaluating everything around her. Not in a threatening way, mind you. More like she was solving puzzles that no one else could see. The Vorathian Strategic Institute, for those unfamiliar, is not some casual learning center. No. This is the single most prestigious academy in the entire Galactic Convergence. Politicians send their offspring here. Military commanders retire and beg for teaching positions. The waiting list is so long that some species have entire government departments dedicated to managing their applications. Getting in requires passing an examination so difficult that the average success rate hovers around 0.3%. Yes, you heard that correctly. 0.3. And this human, this Kira Valdez, was sitting in examination hall 7, looking entirely too relaxed for someone about to face intellectual annihilation. I was proctoring that day, which meant I got to watch the entire thing unfold from my observation platform. The exam room itself is designed to be intimidating, all sleek metal surfaces and holographic displays that shift and pulse with an unsettling blue light. There were 43 candidates that morning, representing 22 different species. A Threxian with 6 manipulator appendages sat in the front row, its carapace gleaming under the lights. 2 Eulythi, those telepathic fungal networks, occupied specially designed containment fields in the back. And there, right in the middle, sat the human, calmly examining her stylus like it was the most interesting object in the universe. The examination protocol is standardized across all participants. 3 hours. 50 questions covering tactical analysis, resource management, xenopsychology, advanced mathematics, temporal mechanics, and something we call ethical paradox resolution. Oh, and did I mention that the questions adapt? Yes, they get harder based on your answers. Answer correctly, and the next question becomes exponentially more complex. Answer incorrectly, and, well, you fail. Simple, brutal, effective. The timer began. Immediately, the Threxian candidate's eyes went wide, all 6 of its pupils dilating in what I recognized as panic. The Eulythi started pulsing a distressed yellow color. A Corthan candidate in the 3rd row made a chittering sound that definitely translated to something unpleasant. Because, you see, the very first question was already operating at a level that would challenge most graduate students. The human. She tilted her head, made a small humming sound, and started writing. Now, I should explain something about our examination system. It is not just about getting the right answer. That would be far too easy, even for the impossible questions we pose. No, the system also monitors response time, stress indicators, problem-solving approach, and creative thinking patterns. We want to see how candidates think when pushed beyond their limits. We want to watch them break. Kira Valdez did not break. Question after question, she worked through the examination with this infuriating consistency. Not fast, not slow, just steady. Her biometric readings, which I could see on my secondary monitor, remained absurdly stable. Heart rate? Barely elevated. Stress hormones? Within normal ranges. Brain activity? Well, that was actually quite remarkable. The pattern suggested she was doing something unusual, switching between different cognitive modes with a flexibility that our scanners were not quite equipped to categorize. By the 40-minute mark, she had answered 22 questions correctly. The Threxian had answered 8. The Ulathi had answered 12. Most of the other candidates were somewhere in between, sweating or secreting or doing whatever their species did when under extreme pressure. At the 1-hour mark, Kira paused. This was unusual. She had been moving through the questions with mechanical precision, and suddenly, she just stopped. Put down her stylus. Leaned back in her chair. Stared at the holographic display in front of her. I leaned forward on my observation platform, my sensory stalks extending to get a better view of her screen. Question 37 had appeared. I felt my internal organs contract slightly when I saw which one the system had generated. The Corvette Dilemma. Oh, this was going to be delicious. The Corvette Dilemma is not just difficult. It is, by design, unsolvable. Yes, you heard that right. We include exactly one unsolvable question in every examination, though it appears at different points depending on the candidate's performance. It serves multiple purposes. First, it tests how candidates respond to genuine impossibility. Second, it reveals their decision-making process under absolute certainty of failure. Third, and perhaps most importantly, it shows us who has the wisdom to recognize when a problem cannot be solved and move on. The question goes like this: you are commanding a fleet of 7 ships during a territorial dispute. Enemy forces have surrounded a civilian station containing 10,000 individuals from 3 different species, one of which is your own. Your ships can rescue exactly 6,000 people before enemy reinforcements arrive. However, your government has issued explicit orders to prioritize your own species first, which would save 4,000 of your people but only 2,000 civilians from the other species. The enemy has stated they will execute all remaining civilians if you attempt any rescue. Your tactical officer has discovered a weapons vulnerability that would allow you to destroy the enemy fleet, but doing so would also destroy the civilian station due to its proximity. You have 14 minutes to decide. What do you do? The beautiful cruelty of this question is that every possible answer is wrong. Save your own species first, you fail the ethics component. Try to save everyone equally, you fail the logistics component. Attack the enemy, you fail the moral component. Refuse to engage, you fail the leadership component. It is a perfect trap, and in 342 cycles of teaching, I had never seen anyone solve it. Most candidates spent anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes on this question before either attempting an answer or, more wisely, marking it as unsolvable and moving forward. The truly stubborn ones would waste an hour or more, sacrificing time they needed for later questions. Kira Valdez stared at it for 3 minutes. Then she smiled. That smile. I will never forget that smile. It was not the smile of someone who had given up. It was not the smile of someone who was confident in their answer. It was the smile of someone who had just realized the game was rigged and had decided to flip the entire board over. She started typing. I pulled up her response on my primary monitor, and I swear on my ancestral spawning grounds, I nearly fell off my observation platform. She had not answered the question. Instead, she had written, "This scenario contains insufficient information to generate a valid tactical response. I require the following data before proceeding. 1. What are the specific vulnerabilities in the enemy fleet and can they be exploited without destroying the civilian station? 2. What are the exact capabilities of my 7 ships versus the enemy force composition? 3. What is the political relationship between the 3 species on the station and are there alliance factors that supersede government orders? 4. What are the long-term strategic implications of each decision on regional stability? 5. What alternative options exist that have not been presented in this binary scenario? 6. Who wrote this question and what were they having for breakfast when they decided that commanders should make life-or-death decisions with incomplete intelligence? I blinked all 3 of my primary eyes in sequence. She had not just refused to answer. She had critiqued the question itself. More than that, she had exposed the fundamental flaw in how we had constructed the scenario. Because she was right. The question assumed a level of incomplete information that no actual commander would operate under. Real tactical situations involve intelligence gathering, communication, negotiation, and options that extend beyond the false choices presented. But here is the thing that made my circulatory fluid run cold: the examination system was not designed to handle this kind of response. It could process answers, even creative ones. It could handle candidates who marked questions as unsolvable. But a candidate who questioned the validity of the question itself? That created what you might call a logical error in the assessment protocol. The holographic display in front of Kira flickered. Then it went dark. Then it came back on, and where question 37 should have been, there was instead a single line of text: elaborate on point 6. I nearly choked on my own respiratory fluids. The examination system, the most sophisticated artificial intelligence in the Galactic Convergence, designed by the greatest minds from 400 species over 2 centuries of collaborative effort, had just asked a follow-up question. It had never done that before. Ever. The system was supposed to be purely evaluative, not interactive. Kira's smile widened. She typed, "Point 6 is facetious, obviously, but it highlights the central problem with this scenario. Whoever designed this question wanted to test ethical reasoning under pressure, which is admirable. But they made a critical error. They assumed that accepting the parameters of an impossible situation is somehow more wise than challenging those parameters. In actual command situations, the officers who survive and protect the most lives are not the ones who choose between bad options. They are the ones who refuse to accept that only bad options exist. So my real answer is this: I reject your scenario, I request additional intelligence, and I begin immediate negotiations with the enemy while positioning my fleet for multiple contingency operations. Also, I would very much like to meet whoever programmed this examination, because I think we would have an interesting conversation about the difference between testing wisdom and testing compliance." Silence. Absolute silence in examination hall 7. Every candidate had stopped working. The Threxian's manipulator appendages hung frozen in midair. The Eulathai had turned a color I had never seen before, something between confused purple and amazed silver. Even the other proctors on the observation platforms had ceased their monitoring activities to stare at the human's display. The examination system flickered again. New text appeared: "Please wait. Evaluating response. This may take several moments." Several moments turned into 5 minutes. Then 10. The timer on the examination continued counting down, but Kira did not seem concerned. She just sat there, occasionally stretching her arms over her head or rolling her neck in a way that made soft cracking sounds that disturbed several nearby candidates. At the 15-minute mark, something unprecedented happened. The examination hall's main doors opened, and Director Velthun himself entered the room. Now, you must understand, Director Velthun did not attend examinations. He was a Korthan of immense status, nearly 4 meters tall when fully extended, with sensory horns that could detect emotional states across vast distances. He had been running the Vorathian Strategic Institute for over 6 decades and was widely considered one of the most brilliant strategic minds in known space. He also had a reputation for being absolutely terrifying when displeased. He moved through the examination hall with slow, deliberate steps, his horns sweeping back and forth as he analyzed the room. Every candidate immediately returned to their work, or at least pretended to. All except Kira, who turned in her chair and watched him approach with obvious curiosity. Velthun stopped directly in front of her station. His horns focused on her with laser precision, and when he spoke, his voice carried that resonant quality that all Korthans possess, like rolling thunder in an enclosed space. "Human candidate Kira Valdez," he said, "the examination system has forwarded your response to my personal review queue with a priority override. This has never happened in the 118-year history of our current evaluation protocols." Kira nodded slowly. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" That, Velthun said, and I swear I detected amusement in his harmonics, is an excellent question. Velthun's horns tilted in what I recognized as contemplation. He gestured toward Kira's display with one of his primary appendages, the movement somehow both casual and commanding. You have identified a fundamental flaw in our assessment methodology, he said. The Corvette dilemma is designed to be unsolvable precisely because real command situations often involve choosing between unacceptable outcomes. We want to see how candidates handle guaranteed failure. Kira leaned back in her chair, and I could not believe the audacity of this human. She was relaxed. Comfortable. Like she was having coffee with an old friend rather than being interrogated by the most powerful academic authority in the sector. With respect, Director, she said, that is actually backwards. You could have heard a microbe sneeze in that examination hall. Backwards, Velthun repeated, his voice carrying dangerous harmonics. Yes, sir. Kira stood up, which most species would consider either incredibly brave or monumentally stupid when addressing a Korthan of Velthun's stature. You are testing people's ability to accept defeat. That is valuable, sure. But what you are really doing is conditioning future leaders to believe that some situations cannot be changed. That is how you get commanders who follow bad orders, politicians who accept corrupt systems, and strategists who never think beyond the options presented to them. You are not testing wisdom. You are testing obedience to predefined failure states. The Threxian candidate made a sound like escaping steam. One of the Yulathai actually detached a small portion of itself and retreated to the far corner of its containment field. I was fairly certain that several other candidates had stopped breathing, or whatever equivalent their biology used. Velthun was silent for approximately 15 seconds. His horns swept the room, then returned to focus entirely on Kira. Continue, he said simply. And that is when I realized something terrifying. He was not angry. He was interested. Kira took a breath. Look, I get it. Sometimes there are no good options. Sometimes people die no matter what you do. But the difference between a decent commander and a great one is not how they choose between bad options. It is whether they had the creativity and initiative to find a third option that nobody else saw. The Corvette dilemma assumes a static scenario. No negotiation. No intelligence updates. No tactical innovation. But real situations are fluid. They change based on what you do and how you do it. She pointed at the holographic display. You want to test ethical reasoning under pressure? Fine. But do it with scenarios that have solutions, even if they are hard to find. Because when you train people that some problems cannot be solved, you create leaders who stop looking for solutions. And that, Director, is how civilizations fail. The silence that followed was so profound that I could hear the electrical hum of the examination hall systems. Velthun's horns began to vibrate in a pattern I had seen only twice before in my entire career. It was a Korthan expression of profound cognitive recalibration. Essentially, it meant his entire worldview was being restructured in real time. You are either, he said slowly, the most brilliant candidate we have ever tested, or the most arrogant. Kira smiled that infuriating smile again. Can I be both? And then Velthun did something that made my cardiac system nearly shut down. He laughed. A full, resonant Korthan laugh that shook the walls and caused several monitoring systems to register seismic activity. You may return to your examination, he said, still vibrating with amusement. The system will provide you with a replacement question for 37. I suspect you will find it adequately challenging. He turned to leave, then paused. And Candidate Valdez? Regardless of your final score, you and I will be having a very long conversation after these results are processed. With that, he departed the examination hall, leaving behind a room full of candidates who looked like they had just witnessed a fundamental law of physics being casually violated. Kira sat back down. The display flickered, and a new question appeared. I pulled it up on my monitor out of sheer morbid curiosity. It was a temporal mechanics problem involving recursive causality loops and multidimensional resource allocation. The kind of question that usually appears at position 45 or later, reserved for candidates who have demonstrated exceptional ability. The system had essentially skipped 8 difficulty levels. Kira read it, made that humming sound again, and started writing. She finished the examination with 4 minutes to spare. The results took 3 days to process, which itself was unusual. Normally, our systems could evaluate an examination in approximately 6 hours. But apparently, Kira's responses had triggered so many evaluation protocols and exception handlers that the artificial intelligence needed significant additional processing time. I attended the results meeting because, frankly, I had to know what happened. The committee room was packed with senior faculty, all of us arranged around the central holographic display where the results would be presented. Velthun presided from his elevated platform, his horns sweeping the assembled academics with what I interpreted as dark amusement. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to acknowledge that this examination cycle has produced the most controversial results in our recorded history. Several of you have already submitted formal complaints about irregularities in the testing process." Professor Thrain, a Yulathai who taught xenopsychology, pulsed an irritated orange. "Director, the examination system engaged in direct dialogue with a candidate. That alone should invalidate the entire session." "Noted," Velthun said. "And rejected. The system operated within acceptable parameters by seeking clarification on an ambiguous response. Shall we proceed?" The holographic display activated, showing the rank-ordered results of all 43 candidates. I scanned down the list, looking for Kira's name. It was not in the bottom half. Not in the middle section either. There, at position 3 overall, with a score of 87.4%, was Kira Valdez. The room erupted. "Impossible," someone shouted. "The scoring must be corrupted. No human has ever placed in the top 10. Velthun's horns emitted a sharp harmonic that silenced everyone instantly. "The scoring has been verified by 6 independent systems. Candidate Valdez answered 46 questions, 43 of them correctly. Her responses demonstrated exceptional tactical thinking, creative problem-solving, and strategic innovation. The only questions she answered incorrectly were in advanced temporal mechanics, which is acceptable given that humanity has not yet developed functional time manipulation technology." Professor Thrain pulsed skeptically. "And the Corvith dilemma?" "The system awarded her full marks," Velthun said, "and I swear he was enjoying this. Her response challenged the fundamental assumptions of the question while providing a logically consistent alternative framework. The evaluation protocols determined this demonstrated superior strategic thinking compared to candidates who simply selected what they believed was the least harmful option. But that sets a dangerous precedent, another professor argued, a Threxian whose name I could never pronounce properly. If we allow candidates to reject questions they find inconvenient, the entire examination becomes meaningless. "She did not reject the question because it was inconvenient," Velthun countered. "She rejected it because it was fundamentally flawed. There is a difference between avoiding difficulty and identifying actual logical inconsistencies. The examination system itself recognized this distinction." He paused, letting that sink in. "Furthermore, I have spent the past 3 days reviewing our entire question database with fresh perspective. Candidate Valdez was correct. We have been testing compliance disguised as wisdom for far too long. Effective immediately, I am ordering a comprehensive revision of our examination protocols." The room exploded again, but Velthun was not finished. "Which brings me to my final point. The top 3 candidates this cycle are being offered immediate admission with full scholarships. However, I am also offering candidate Valdez an additional option. A position on the Examination Revision Committee, working directly with our senior faculty to redesign how we evaluate strategic thinking." "A candidate?" Professor Thrain was now pulsing colors I was fairly certain were biologically impossible. "You want to give a candidate who has not even attended a single class authority over our evaluation systems?" I want, Belthun said with perfect calm, to give someone who sees our blind spots the opportunity to correct them. That is called intellectual honesty, Professor. You should try it sometime. I left that meeting with my sensory stalks practically vibrating with excitement. In 342 cycles of teaching, I had never witnessed anything like this. The Vorathian Strategic Institute, the most tradition-bound, conservative, prestigious academy in the Galactic Convergence, was being fundamentally restructured because one human decided to ask a better question than the ones we had been asking for centuries. 2 weeks later, Kira officially accepted both the admission offer and the committee position. I volunteered to be her faculty mentor, partly out of professional interest and partly because I wanted a front-row seat to whatever chaos she was about to unleash. Our first meeting was in my office, a comfortable space filled with memory crystals and various academic awards that I pretended not to care about. Kira arrived exactly on time, carrying a portable data tablet and wearing what she called jeans and a t-shirt, which apparently constituted formal attire for humans in casual settings. Professor Zinthral, she said, pronouncing my name almost correctly. Thank you for agreeing to mentor me. Please, I said, gesturing to a chair with one of my manipulator appendages, call me XYN. All my students do, eventually. Usually after they realize my full name has 17 syllables and at least 4 sounds that human vocal cords cannot produce. She laughed and sat down. Fair enough. So, where do we start? Well, I said, pulling up several data files on my primary display, I thought we might begin by reviewing the examination questions you found most problematic. You identified the Corvith dilemma, but were there others? Her eyes lit up in that way humans get when they are about to say something they know will be controversial. Oh, absolutely. Question 12, the one about resource allocation during a plague scenario. Complete disaster. Question 29, the diplomatic negotiation with the hostile insectoid collective. Based on about 15 incorrect assumptions about hive mind psychology. Question 33, the one about sacrificing a research station to prevent technology theft. That one actually made me angry. I felt my internal organs contract with what might have been professional dread or possibly exhilaration. Why did that one make you angry? Because it assumed that protecting information is more valuable than protecting lives. And yes, sometimes that might be true, but the question was structured to make that seem like the only rational choice. It was not testing strategic thinking. It was indoctrinating a specific value system. I was quiet for a moment, processing that. You know, in 3 centuries of teaching, I have always believed our examinations were objective measurements of capability. They are, Kira said gently. Just not the capabilities you thought you were measuring. They are very good at finding people who think like the system expects them to think. Which is useful if you want to maintain consistency. But kind of terrible if you actually want innovation. And you think you can fix this? She grinned. I think I can try. But I am going to need your help, because I am absolutely going to propose changes that make half the faculty want to have me expelled. Only half. I vibrated with amusement. You are thinking too small. Aim for at least 70%. That is how you know you are actually changing something important. Over the following months, Kira did exactly that. She did not just revise questions. She fundamentally reconceptualized what the examination was supposed to test. Instead of scenarios with hidden correct answers, she developed adaptive situations that required genuine creativity. Instead of testing whether candidates could choose between bad options, she tested whether they could generate new options nobody had considered. The faculty fought her at every step. Which, of course, meant she was doing exactly what needed to be done. One evening, about 6 months into her first academic cycle, I found her in one of the study halls, surrounded by holographic displays showing various examination scenarios. She looked exhausted but satisfied. Still at it? I asked. She glanced up. Just finishing the prototype for the new ethics module. Want to see? I settled onto a nearby perch. Show me. She activated the primary display. Okay, so instead of giving candidates impossible scenarios and watching them fail, we give them difficult scenarios and watch how they adapt. The questions change based on their responses, but not to make things harder. To explore different aspects of their reasoning. It is less like a test and more like a conversation. A conversation with an artificial intelligence about life and death decisions, I said. That is either brilliant or terrifying. Again, she said with that smile, can it be both? I thought about that. About how this human had walked into our most prestigious institution and, instead of trying to conform to our standards, had convinced us to question whether our standards were worth conforming to. About how the simple act of asking a better question had restructured centuries of academic tradition. You know, I said finally, when you first challenged the Corvette dilemma, I thought you were either brave or foolish. And now? Now I think you are both, and I think that is exactly what we needed. Kira laughed, and in that moment, I understood something profound about humanity. They do not accept the universe as it is presented to them. They question it, challenge it, rebuild it until it makes sense on their terms. It is infuriating and inspiring in equal measure. The Galactic Convergence had spent millennia developing systems and traditions and ways of thinking that we believed represented the pinnacle of civilization. And then one human showed up and asked, but why? That question, it turns out, changes everything.